Hi, it's Juan Martinez of Thought Studio. I've got another couple of thoughts for you regarding drawing Bargue drawings. And you can see here I've got that eye that I drew in the past. And one of the things we talked about was the line quality. If we look at the original Bargue drawings done in litho pencil, they look very much like charcoal lines. They're kind of thick and a little bit hazy edged, not very dark. They're about as dark as you can go with charcoal, let's say. And these pencil marks emulate them just fine. And one of the things is that this is especially true for a rank beginner, but even anybody who's got experience but hasn't really made these types of marks before. I'll show you a way to approach it and a way to practice it, which I think you'll find helpful. It'll also help in understanding how to hold the pencil and both here and what to do with these pointy points. Make a few marks in practicing. I've done a few here. So what I had said before, what you often will see is you want to be making the line back and forth, more or less over the same mark. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going on there that isn't necessarily intuitive, I guess. One of the things is what angle, and I think you can probably see it on that camera, what is the angle to hold the pencil at? If it's too flat, then you run the risk of not actually even making a mark at the tip. So if you want to be super accurate, you aren't going to do that. This is going to be very good for a large drawing. A lot of times people will start their drawings like this because they want a very generally thick, broad, soft line because they haven't quite worked out exactly where that final one will be. The more vertically you orient the pencil, the smaller the line will be, and in order to make it thicker, you have to go over many times. And one of the problems with that is what you do with your hand so that you can control it. If you're making a really long, wide line, you often will have to move all the way from the wrist, not just the fingers. If you're working on a large charcoal, let's say, or even a pencil drawing, you might have to swing the entire arm. I don't know if this is quite visible, probably isn't. But everything that we do is on this kind of an arc like this, where it's the natural movement. See, my fingers are not really moving in relation to one another, and I'm holding very lightly. I'm holding just with this finger and the thumb, and that's just rested on it. And I'm moving at the wrist for even very small movements. I'm still not moving. See, here I'm moving my fingers. It starts to get wavier and more difficult to control that way.
Here's another demonstration of this kind of line making. This is by Norman Choo, associate instructor at Thought Studio. And you can see how he's using his entire arm as the fulcrum point and making lovely straight lines in this case. But throughout he's got, for example, his hand is just lightly resting on the paper to act as a steadying guide. And now here you can see the longer lines and the shorter ones, which I was demonstrating, and it's more appropriate for the smaller drawing. But when you start getting into larger drawings, bigger pieces of paper, perhaps figure drawing, large casts, etc., you can see how that arcing movement just continues along basically in the same way as you had been doing them. And you can make fairly straight lines, so you're ranging from rectilinear to curvilinear. And continuing this kind of practice really makes this very second nature and doesn't take all that long. Also, you can make circles or practice making circles and making ellipses. This is all very good way to not just practice something, but to warm up for some sort of a drawing session. You end up getting better at this kind of stuff very quickly if you do something like what is being demonstrated here on a daily basis.
I'm resting my hand on the paper just as support. So if you've got a drawing already in action here, and there's a bunch of things down below that you don't want to mess up, then you should put another piece of paper there, for instance, and then you can still rest your hand on it. Here's a way to practice that stuff. And this is very deliberate practice. If you want to make a mark from point A to point B, arbitrarily here, I'll just make a length. First of all, the idea is you make this entire mark from here to there in one go. Let's go from A to B. Let's go from A to B. So see what I'm doing? I'm actually practicing. I'm touching. I can do it, if a rank beginner, with your finger. Touch, 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 touch. And you see my hand is touching as well. My hand is not floating above the paper. It's touch, 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 touch. Then you sweep. Touch, sweep, lift. Touch, sweep, lift. Touch, sweep, lift. Now you can go the other way. Touch, sweep, lift. Touch, sweep, lift. Touch, sweep, lift. Touch, sweep, lift. And then last one, sweeping both ways. Touch, sweep, back, touch, back, back, back. Okay. Try that a few times just to get the idea that you're going from A to B. Then you hold a pencil. Do the same thing. Touch, 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 sweep, touch, sweep, touch, sweep, touch, sweep. I'm not pressing hard at all. Of course, if you press hard, these points break. So this is very good for a light touch. And I'm guiding it the whole way with my hand trying to be the leveler or the steadier. Touch. Go back the other way. Touch, cross, touch, cross, touch, cross, touch, cross. Now I go back and forth. Eventually, it'll be quite second nature. And you have to make another one going another way. You might go from point C to D now. And this is your other angle of another part of the drawing. And when you're copying something, you literally want to be rehearsing it first like this. Here's another one you might want to do over there. So some point there to some point here. And you want to turn your hand around so that you're comfortable in that direction as well, or turn the paper so that your arc movement feels as natural as can be, and you're always working with the natural arc formed simply by your anatomy. You're not, if you make a line, trying to make a line like that this way is actually very hard to do. I can't do it at all. I'm literally trying to do it. Maybe if I went slower, I can do it. But then I don't have these hazy lines if I have to do another one. If I turn this around so that it's on a more natural angle for my hand, then it's quite easy. These are the kinds of things that you can practice just while you're having a cup of coffee in the morning on a pad of paper. Just trying going back and forth, because it is a bit of a motor action that maybe you haven't done before. And it doesn't take terribly long, but eventually you'll have the hang of it. And you can start putting things together as you're drawing something. Practicing you can if you wanted to make curves, you start off with a rectilinear type of approach and then curve the corners. And it's very much how you you can manage through a, a figure drawing or a bargue drawing or anything, is you start off with, it's a very typical block-in type of a situation where you start off with things that are rectilinear, and then you eventually make them curved. But there's typically, in most arcs and curves of any natural object, besides a ball, let's say, and even a ball you could argue this, there's some point where you have more or less something that's flat and straight, and then there's a part between those two flat lengths that is curved. Or curved the other way, whatever it is. Anyway, I hope that's helpful to you. I would just, to recap, I would say, first do a rehearsal, literally, not just in your mind, but actually on the paper, back and forth, especially when you're practicing. Do it with your finger so that you know which way you're going, you're getting your mind in the right direction, and then you try to match what's in your mind there now with pencil on paper, back and forth, or just one direction, other direction, and then back and forth. All those things you can accumulate quite easily over a relatively short time. Anyway, that's about it. So I hope to see you again.